What's the biggest myth about raising money you believed going into this latest round?
That you need to do it. My biggest learning was that you don't really need to raise. And I think that's true for a lot of businesses. I understood all the problems and that it's manual, it's slow, it's expensive. But because of AI agents, we can automate a lot of the pain and admin around sourcing and screening and shortlisting. It's not for everybody. I wouldn't recommend it to most people. But if you're crazy enough and if you want to build something generational, then shoot for the moon and go for it. I think for us, it was about trying to be ambitious, trying to double down, trying to grow quickly, and trying to win the mind share of the customer within our TAM.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Raise, the No BS podcast on fundraising. I'm very excited today to have Alfie Whattam from Alpha AI chatting about his recent funding round. And I had the pleasure of having front row tickets to this one because I've been advising Alfie behind the scenes for a little while now. So Alfie, welcome to the show.
Nick, thank you for having me. My pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about Alpha AI, just to set the scenes. We don't need a big background, but a one-liner and a little bit about what you guys do just to set the audience up.
Yeah, no problem. Alpha builds AI agents for hiring. So I was a recruiter for a decade and I understood all the problems and that it's manual, it's slow, it's expensive. But because of AI agents, we can automate a lot of the pain and admin around sourcing and screening and shortlisting. And that's what we're doing, trying to build faster and fairer and slicker experiences for people hiring, for candidates, and everything in between.
Excellent. And who's sort of your ICP?
We sell to huge customers like Revolut and Google and multinational staffing agencies, as well as some startups and scale-ups, but really anyone looking to hire, ideally at scale, ideally for either high volume or hard to find positions. We're mostly across London and San Fran and LA and New York at the moment, but we're starting to get more and more customers across Europe and the Middle East and Africa as well, and the wider region.
Excellent. And do you have a one-liner or a hook you want to share with the audience?
Our tagline for a while was Think Higher, as in Hire. So our play on word, our version of Apple's Think Different, which it looks fantastic on like a bumper sticker, but I guess it doesn't really mean too much. So I usually just say AI agents for hiring. I think most people would understand what it means from that kind of catchphrase.
Fair. Well, you pulled this one out of the bag late. I hadn't even heard this one. Think higher. I like it. You got an agentic framework for hiring. All you have to do is just think about the next person you want, and there they are. No?
If only it was that easy. Well, you have to think as a customer. That's what I believe magical products and experiences should be. They click a button, they type in a few words, and then magic happens behind the scenes, and then that's delivered to you. The front end should always be as simple and as magical as possible. The real complexity is in the back end, right?
Totally. Okay, so let's kick off. One word. When you hear fundraising, what is the first word that pops into your mind?
Roller coaster.
What's the biggest myth about raising money you believed going into this latest round?
That you need to do it.
All right. Well, I'm sure we'll unpack that one a little bit as we go. But okay, so let's just rewind a little bit. I guess probably take me back to whatever the right point is last year, I assume in 2025. That exact moment when you decided to raise, what was happening in the business and in your life, even that week, if you can actually remember?
I was a recruiter for a decade, so this was my world, and I understood all of the problems which needed to be solved. And then about a year ago, AI started to get really, really good, and I saw that it was going to replace a large part of what I was doing as a headhunter. So I decided just to go all in, and I raised pre-seed from some incredible VCs and angels. I pulled together my team. We spent a few months building the product. We launched it. Had some great early success, And then off the back of that, we decided it was time to do the second round and raise the seed. And then that's when I got in touch with you. I think it was about Christmas time, if I'm not mistaken.
So why raise it all at that point, and why the amount that you ultimately landed on?
I said earlier that my biggest learning was that you don't really need to raise. And I think that's true for a lot of businesses. I think for us, we were in a position where things were going well. And for us, we wanted to pour more fuel on the fire and very quickly accelerate and try to capture the market before somebody else did. So I think for us, it was about trying to be ambitious, trying to double down, trying to grow quickly, and trying to win the mind share of the customer within our TAM. And I think we set out to raise $1 million and successfully did so, because I feel like that was a good next step for us to turn our initial V1 product that we've launched into a proper enterprise grade application, which is now being used by some of the largest companies in the world after just a year of launch. And I feel that is a good amount for us to get to the next milestone and start positioning ourselves for the next round.
And what did you think this most recent raise process was going to look like going in, and what surprises came out of it for you, or what kind of met your expectations? Like what felt aligned, what didn't? How did the process go for you?
I mean, you have a much better grasp of what the VC world is like at the moment. But I've done 2 rounds in my life, right? My pre-seed was mostly friends and family and a couple of VCs that I know from doing my podcast and from my networking and my time in the London tech ecosystem. This was my proper first process where I had an actual product. I had numbers, I had customers, I had a story, and I had to go out there to the market and sell that. And it was fantastic working with you and other advisors to go through an actual structured system to arrive at the outcome that we wanted. And that involved, mapping out the market. It involved doing, weeks of first stage meetings. It involved the challenges and all the ups and downs that come along with that process, and then getting a couple of term sheets, negotiating, getting the lead. And then from there, it's a case of just wrapping up the follow-on afterwards. It sounds very, very simple when I put it that way. But as you know, it was not simple and it's not easy. And there's a reason why 99% of people that try and do this don't succeed. And it's not for everybody. I wouldn't recommend it to most people. But if you're crazy enough and if you want to build something generational, then shoot for the moon and go for it.
Absolutely agree. I always love this quote from Paul Graham, where he says, the hardest thing in the world is to build a product that customers love. And the second hardest is to raise capital. And I think fundraising has become so sort of normalized in the world of startups. All the press headlines, everyone's got a mate that's raised capital. But until you've done it yourself, or in my case, myself and with a bunch of other founders, roller coaster is a very good one word to describe it. And the market's changing around you all the time. You're having to kind of sit almost outside and above your own body and your mind to spar with some of these wildly intelligent investors out there, some who pigeonhole on the wrong things, others who focus on the right things. So, I've always found this whole fundraising space is incredibly fascinating and really in need of demystifying, because so many of us do end up doing it or having to do it, but actually figuring out what works, what doesn't, pitfalls to avoid. That's what this podcast is really all about. So, obviously I had an inside seat with you. So I'm sure we'll go into a few more like deep inside bits as we go along, but this is a perfect segue into the actual kind of the trenches of the raise. So, maybe throw yourself back to one of the early investor meetings, whether it was in December when we met or sort of in the first couple months of the year, and tell me about a bad experience. Tell me about an investor meeting where you just felt like everything went wrong or it just flopped for one reason or another. Share something along those lines with us.
I mean, I have so many. I completely sucked when I started. When I roped you into helping me over Christmas and encouraged you to cancel your holiday I mean, I love speed, and I love just moving quickly, right? So why do it in a month from now when we can start today? So when I first started, we had some great initial meetings, and we had one fund who maybe I'll name one day, but they seemed really, really interested. And then we had another meeting, and then another meeting. And I think it was like 8 or 9 meetings that we had. I must have met 20 people at that fund, every LP's brother and sister. And then we got to know after all that, after meeting them in person multiple times, after going through that process. And it was a great reminder that it's not done until it's done, and you should never count your chickens before they hatch. What it did teach me, though, was the importance of FOMO and using the fact that you're at IC or using the fact that you're at later stages to create interest with other funds. Some VCs that I speak with are incredibly intelligent and switched on, and they know what's happening. And then other ones just are like following the herd, and like it's so easy to use the right buzzwords to get their interest effectively, and you need to strike that balance. And like ultimately you want the right people on your cap table, so you don't want to be heading down that direction. But it was a really interesting learning experience. That investing at very early stage it's basically about vibes, and can you generate the right vibes with people, and can you generate excitement and interest. And there's really basic things that you can do, like if I start speaking quickly you get really excited, but then if I go slowly and take my time and pause, it builds suspense. And it's like these little psychological tricks that you learn, and you can't learn it from a book, you can't learn it from a podcast. You can try, and it'll give you a bit of an advantage, but you kind of have to learn by just getting slapped in the face 50 times until the 51st meeting, and then you start to get like fairly decent at it.
Yeah, it's about getting the reps in, right? Like it's also helpful, hopefully, having an advisor like me helping you accelerate, but without getting the reps in, you can't get stronger, you can't improve.
Absolutely. It's so cliche, it's what everybody says, but until you're actually, in the arena and doing it, you don't really know what it's like. And I think that's why most people go wrong, because they try it once or twice, they get a no, and then they quit. I read a stat that was like 99% of pitch decks never get funding. So it really is a game of resilience. It really is a game of iteration. Like if your pitch is the same on the 30th one as on your first one, then you haven't learned. You're not smart enough. You haven't changed. You need to be constantly listening to feedback and feeding the AI summaries into the latest LLMs and asking it for how you can improve and what you can do differently and what you can do better. And then the story that you pitch right at the end is probably like very, very different than the story at the beginning. But that's like the exciting part. That's the game. That's the journey of discovery and how you get better and stronger and more effective.
Yeah, and you're basically treating the fundraising process like a product process. You're building the narrative, you're testing it, you're learning, you're iterating, and you're going back through feedback loops. And it's not just surface level. I mean, there's things you did to change the business during the course. On that level, like, is there anything you changed kind of mid-process that turned the tide?
I made the classic founder mistake of going all in on the raise to the point where my kind of existing customers maybe didn't get enough attention and focus as they did previously to the raise. So we were still growing, but it wasn't, we started out really, really strong growing, and then we started growing a lot slower. And it's really hard to get VCs excited if the story is the last 3 months we've grown at a slower rate than what we grew the 3 months before that. So what I basically did after doing a bunch of meetings was I just went back to the customers for a couple of weeks and really doubled down and expanded and grew those accounts and brought on new logos. And then we went let's skyrocketed, and we tripled in 2 weeks. And then that was what allowed me to then go back to all of the funds and say, hey, I'm sorry, I've been a little bit quiet. I've been super busy. Here's what I've been doing. Do you want to catch up? And then it was like, yes. So you're absolutely right about that Paul Graham quote, where the hardest thing is building a company. The second hardest thing is getting the investors. But if you master the first, the second will follow.
Totally. I mean, one thing I really enjoyed about working with you is it didn't take much, if any, convincing to get you to go all in on the raise. A lot of times I have to fight with the CEO over a series of days and weeks to just say, look, you need to clear your calendar. You need to delegate to your team, because while I know it's impossible in practice to get 100% of your calendar dedicated to the raise, I need as close to 100% of your energy and your attention units focused on the raise. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult, which is also why it's so important to try and do it in short bursts. And I think what we kind of managed to do, which was part by design and part by not exactly luck, but just how the sequencing worked out, is we went really, really hard early. You planted a ton of seeds, frankly, around the world, which I questioned a little bit, but I think that's one thing I'd like to circle back to. And when our internal speed slowed a little bit at the customer and growth level, we had that heart to heart, and it was like fundraising hat off, like, dude, just go make revenue. This is all about putting money in your bank account. And it's probably faster to take it from customers right now for a few weeks and then go back to investors. And you absolutely, you could not have kicked ass harder in that moment. And it changed the game completely. And then on top of that, you kind of did the first bit in the first raise window of the year and the second bit in the second raise window, because I always talk about there being kind of these two raise windows baked between like January and July. And so you almost did like initial outreach, business growth, and then you went for the close. I might have to map that pattern again, because it actually was really effective.
It was not intentional by design. I probably got quite lucky, and I owe a lot of that to you. But a large part of that was just one thing that I appreciated about the process with you was that I'm quite a direct to the point person, and I don't need a lot of fluff and story around it. And you were very similar. You just when I was messing up, you just told me what I needed to do differently, and I hopefully listened most of the time. I listened enough to the point where I don't know what I don't know. And the fact that people like you have done this 50 times and I've done it twice, I would be an idiot if I didn't at least, go along with even the stuff that I didn't sometimes agree with, because in hindsight, looking back now, I understand why it was done that way. And I think that's what it takes. I think if you're going to go on this journey, I feel like I would have probably been able to do it myself. But even if it gave me an extra 10, 20% of likelihood of succeeding, then I'd be an idiot not to, arm myself with that extra ammunition and give myself the best shot possible.
I, of course, would agree with that, but it's nice hearing. Was there a day of the fundraise that was just like the worst for you, where that night you were really struggling? I feel like there may have been a few I could name, but for you personally, was there a day that was a real challenge? Just take us back into that, because a big part of this is also sharing the emotional side of fundraising, which is almost never talked about, and it is unbelievably gut and heart-wrenching.
I went to the US kind of mid-fundraise, and I know you're keen to talk about this, but I'm in London most of the time, but I spent some weeks in San Fran, in LA, in New York. I even went to China, and I met some like amazing people, and I learned a lot from that. And we ended up getting a term sheet from a fund in LA, which on its surface sounds like a fantastic thing. But when we dig into it, it wasn't the term sheet that we wanted. It wasn't quite where it needed to be. And it did hurt. It was painful to go through that process and get an outcome which was not at the level that I was expecting. However, I was able to use that to stir interest and create FOMO and get other people interested. And it eventually led us to getting a term sheet that we were very, very happy with. And then that led to us getting some fantastic follow-on investors, and overall a process that I can look back on and be very proud with. And I think that's a good lesson in there for people listening, that there are going to be moments, many, many moments throughout that race where you feel like it's just all not going the way that you want it to. You feel like you should give up. You feel like you should quit. You feel like you should stop trying. And you maybe should listen to those people, that those bits of advice, because if you are crazy enough to ignore it, then then you might have the outcome that you'll want and what you'll get. I always find it weird when people and entrepreneurs and investors are getting interviewed and they get asked questions like, what advice would you have? I feel like if somebody needs to hear advice on how to start a company, then you probably shouldn't start a company. Like, you should want to do this because you have a burning desire in you, and no matter how many people try and pour water on that, it just burns brighter and brighter. And fundraising is kind of the same. Like, you are going to go through a lot of pain. Elon Musk says, "Can you eat glass and stare into the abyss?" And that's kind of what it is like at times. You have to have an extremely high pain threshold and tolerance. But if you are crazy enough and if you can do that, then kudos. Maybe you'll win, but who knows?
So through all those hard times and the good times, was there anyone that turned out to be a little bit of like a surprise in terms of being an ally, someone who helped you when you didn't expect it?
I had a lot of fantastic friends who I was somehow able to convince to back us for our pre-seed, for our first round. And that was a fantastic way for me to get some incredible angels on the cap table who ended up becoming super, super useful for introductions and mapping out the market and getting connections to other funds and investors. So that was really, really useful. And I was able to leverage those relationships to get the round closed. I feel like I'm not doing my job properly if I don't give a shout out to the funds that eventually did back us. So our round was led by Sake Bosch, and then we had First Degree follow with Golden Egg Check. And Black Green Capital, who also did our pre-seeds. They wanted to double down. And then I had a few angels like yourself and Tom Savage, who's a very respected angel and entrepreneur in the UK. So I feel like to get to each of those good partnerships, you need to kiss a lot of frogs and go through a lot of funds who are just not quite the right size for you, not the right thesis, not the right vibe, not the right relationship. But you just got to keep pushing, and eventually you'll get there.
So yeah, going through that whole journey and shouting out these great investors, can you take me a little deeper into how you met Sake, how you met these other groups, why they ended up being such a good fit, and also just why you rate them and big them up for other investors? Because I want anyone who listens to hear about great investors, because I feel truly great investors are few and far between.
In terms of the how, I need to map it out and look backwards. But I think our investors for this round came through a combination of warm introductions from people like you and founders in my network, as well as our existing VCs introducing us to funds that they co-invest alongside with often, to using more agentic tools like Bawdy. I managed to get a check from Bawdy, from a VC it connected me with. That's interesting. We did a little bit of cold outreach, but I don't think it really led to anything. And I feel like this game is very much about warm relationships and introductions for the most part. Not saying that you don't go cold. That could be fantastic for angels, and it certainly was for our pre-seed when I didn't really know anybody in this ecosystem. But if you can go through an introduction, it's always far better. I find the best introduction is a founder or somebody that works alongside that fund, and then afterwards maybe an investor. I find the worst introduction can be a fund which passed on you, because why are they introducing you to another fund? It kind of doesn't make sense. So I've stopped saying yes to funds when they offer that to me. It's almost works against you. I've often found, but overall, that's how we did it. Now, in terms of the mechanics of why we went with those funds, I mentioned earlier that early stage investing is largely about vibes, and I feel like it's the same from the founder perspective. There are a lot of funds out there who will give you a terrible, terrible deal, and they will ask for some crazy things which you shouldn't be accepting. And a lot of early first time or second time founders that don't know any different will just say yes because they get the cash. But in reality, you want to reverse DD these funds in the same way that they're trying to analyze if you're a good fit. You want to speak to founders who have taken their money in the past. And what you'll often find is that these funds will appreciate the fact that you're doing this. The word will get back to them, and it will show them that you're serious, that you have options, that you're running a proper process, and that you know what you're doing. So going through that process for a few months led us to some wonderful people who I can now call friends, as well as investors and advisors, and people who I'm WhatsApping with every other day on advice and tips. And I just got off a call before this to discuss our new pricing strategy for enterprises with one of the funds. I had a call over the weekend with one of our backers about some marketing ideas. So you kind of want to find these funds, in my opinion, especially at the early stage, that will be as helpful as possible, not just writing you a check and then never speaking to you again, but as much value that you can get in terms of advice, in terms of introductions, in terms of strategy, in terms of support. That's what's going to separate you from the others that don't have that unfair advantage.
This is one question I ask everyone on the show. Looking back now with everything you know, what would have had to be true for you to not raise this round?
I guess when things were hard and meetings didn't go to plan, having a lack of self-belief or doubt or worry that it wasn't going to work out, I think that optimism and that hope that crazy entrepreneurs have is what kind of pulls you through and gets you across the finish line. I think if I didn't believe that it was possible, then it wouldn't have been possible. It's maybe a terrible comparable, but there's the famous story of the 4-minute mile, and nobody thought it was possible. But as soon as the 4-minute mile was achieved, the next year, like 10, 20 people achieved it, like high schoolers were doing it. You just mentally need to understand that it can be done, and having friends around you that are also on a similar journey and watching them raise money. Sometimes you think that person's no smarter or doesn't work any harder than I do. So if you see them do it, then it just reinforces that belief in your mind that it is possible with enough effort and advice from the right people.
Let's go into the toolbox a little bit and into some tactics before we kind of go into the close and then kind of end this episode. But walk us through how you kind of thought about and actually built your investor pipeline, the research that went into it, like how that kind of thinking evolved over time, how we interplayed in that, how you had your team supporting, like some of like the nerdier kind of operational bits, because you also were like on top of your tech and your data in a way that I really enjoyed.
I think before you go to market, get everything ready. Because once you start the race, you do not want to sit on the sidelines to have a break. You need to be all in. So get the data room over prepared. I had weird stuff in my data room that VCs told me they'd never seen before, from a personality profile on myself to extreme granular metrics on every aspect of the business, which some funds were telling me that they weren't seeing at Series A and B stage. And like having an obsession to the numbers and the data is so important. There's this great quote by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, where he said, your numbers tell you who you are, like nothing more, nothing less. And it's a very mathematical, logical way to look at this. But if you have the numbers and have the data and can paint a story around that, that's what you need ultimately to win in that specific game. So get the data room prepared and then do the market map. Speak to your network, look on Crunchbase, backtrack, see who funded who, and then create a super slick forwardable that you can send to people, which requires zero effort from their end. So my strategy was I had 100, 200 friends in this world. Some of them were great friends. Some of them I hadn't spoken to for a while, and it was a way for me to keep in touch. And then a lot of the time, I would help founders for the past year with introductions to other investors without any expectation that it would lead to anything. But by doing that and adding value and giving, when it was my turn to ask for help and take, a lot of people were very happy to stick their hand up and offer me some support. So I always believe that you should go above and beyond to support other founders, because it will come back to you, whether you are intending it to happen or not. But when you have the data room, so you've got the story, when the pitch is just going to get better and better. So I won't worry too much about that from the get-go, because it's going to be so different after the 30th call anyway. But getting some kind of story together is obviously important. And then getting the market map in place where you can say, here's my 100 friends, here's 3 funds that backed each of them, here's a fantastic forwardable. And then I just pulled like an all-nighter over 2 days and just messaged everybody so we can get the timing right. And then I had a bunch of people that were willing to reach out to people, and you kind of want them doing it at the same time, because if you're a very, very busy VC and you get 5 founders that you backed all suggesting that you speak to this person within 24 hours, like, guess what? Like, they're going to take a meeting. But if you reach out cold, you've never spoken to them before, which, I tried for certain people, like, good luck. Like, it's probably not going to happen. So just like Mark Andreessen once said, the first test of a founder trying to raise capital is, can you network your way to a warm introduction to a fund? And if you can, you kind of failed the first test. Like, how are you going to get customers? How are you going to get like the right hire for your team if you can at least get a warm introduction to somebody somehow? And for me, that was using my podcast to interview, talented founders and build relationships with them. And then later on, they were able to support and reciprocate. That was me going above and beyond to buy products from my friends and just, be there from them and support them as much as possible. Again, not with any commercial expectation, but I guess looking back, I was able to connect those dots that way. So those are a few of the underlying operational mechanics that I think are important. And I think if you get any one of those wrong, then you are doomed to fail from the beginning.
And in terms of finding investors, that approach that you just described was very sort of ground up and kind of founder led and warm network led. And that led us to some very strong introductions and great interest. But you also did a lot of kind of top down market research. And at one point you turned your internal team into working with you to build the long lists, and to the point where like some of those lists were like way too long. But I felt like that was a really interesting part of working with you, is you had the kind of tactical, practical kind of ground up approach, using your own network to add that advantageous warmth to it, while also constantly working with me from almost like a TAM perspective. What are the investors that are looking at this space? Who are the investors that have backed competitors? Like, what are lookalike investors to those kind of groups? And I felt that was another area that you also deployed yourself and internal resource to kind of level yourself up through the race.
Exactly. Like, you can use the latest LLMs to give it your thesis, your stage, your location, and it will give you a pretty decent list. But what it won't give you is their emails and a personalized message for each one. Like, and if you can have your team, we have fantastic virtual assistants in the Philippines who were able to really do a lot of the admin work around that and free up my time, so I could just wake up each morning and do 3 to 5 pitches a day without having to worry about scheduling them or finding the right people. They'd identify who I need to speak to on my behalf, reach out and get those meetings booked, using my tone of voice and templates. They were able to follow up and use the various touch points to get the right people interested, both across the email, but also LinkedIn, sending the right connection notes and engaging with people that way. And then being a bit more creative, I'd send XDMs, I'd send Loom videos to people.
You built a product mid-fundraise, as I remember. I know we may not have stuck with that product, but you even came to me with an entire product looking to leverage some of the stuff you'd been doing manually, which I thought was pretty badass.
I might build something like this one day, but I build AI agents for hiring, so it was very easy to take a lot of that code and build an AI agent for fundraising, which did a very similar thing. It found people, it mapped out the market, and I did use it internally, and dog fooded it to. Whenever I've had a problem, Nick, I've always been able to build software to solve that problem, and this was no different. I was able to build that tool, probably not to the point where it's ready for launch or selling it, and that would probably be a bit of a distraction. But if you can code, and everybody can code in a world of Claude Code and Codex now, then build magical alien-like technology to solve these problems, because it's possible.
I can't remember what you named it, but I remember I loved the name. It was like a Greek mythology name.
I called it Prometheus.
Prometheus, that's right.
I heard Jeff Bezos has launched a company called Prometheus a few weeks later. So he either stole my idea, or he's just a genius billionaire who had a fantastic idea for a company name as well. Probably the latter. But I can't use that name anymore. So thank you, Jeff. You've stolen it.
Yeah, Jeff, if you're listening, we're ready for your next round, for Alpha's next round. Okay. Was there any term or investor ask you had to push back on super hard during the course of the round?
I think I got quite lucky in that there wasn't anything too weird or colorful in the term sheets. I've heard some horror stories from friends of mine, and I've heard a lot of very early first-time founders that don't have the counsel that you gave, end up getting into all kinds of horrible situations where it becomes very hard for them to raise the next round or have an exit, which will give them liquidity. I think if you have the right people around you that can sanity check every legal point, you can make sure that you're not dealing with cowboys. Thankfully, I got pretty lucky with sensible, smart, ethical people this round.
Very true. If you could keep only one tactic from this fundraise, which one survives?
I think just the ability to create extreme FOMO within a very short period of time is a human trait that in a world of AI will always exist. If you have a very talented investor who is seriously considering investing in your company, you've met them 3 or 4 times, you've met the partners, they've looked at the data room. If you can convince 3 or 4 of your friends who know that person somehow to put in a good word for you, that's the difference between them being on the edge and thinking about maybe doing it versus, holy shit, I need to invest in this person. Everybody's telling me to do it. Like, okay, where do I sign?
Very good. All right, well, let's go into the aftermath now. So you closed the £1 million. What changed the moment the final wire hit? Like when the money hit your bank account? I know we had a call that evening, but what else actually changed for you, for your business, for your team?
I mean, I've never seen £1 million in a bank account before, so that was kind of cool. I'm a young guy. I'm in my 20s, so a lot of my friends around me have achieved 10 times more than that, but they have got a decade on me, so hopefully I'll catch up. But I sat there staring at the money for 2 seconds, and then I got back to work, to be completely honest with you. It's nice knowing that, I'm building an AI company. AI companies burn a lot of money. We could be profitable if we wanted to be. There are some certain things that we could do, but I don't want to build a small lifestyle business. I want to shoot for the moon and see what happens. Maybe we'll land amongst the stars, but I'd like to give it a try and give it my all. Somebody will in my space. In the same way there's been an AI engineer with Claude and Lovable, and an AI lawyer with Legova and Harvey, there'll be an AI recruiter, and if I'm not one of the people that achieves that outcome, I will regret it for the rest of my life. So I really want to go for it and see what happens. So I looked at the money for a few seconds and then figured out how we can deploy it and who we can hire and how we can support our customers more and what more marketing and branding we can do. And there were a lot of things which we now need to do to become a serious company, from a design refresh to a security review to getting our legals, really, really in place to support enterprises. And it's nice having the cash available to now do those things. And now it's a case of analyzing what needs to be done, deploying the capital, and executing against that to achieve the outcomes.
What do you believe about fundraising now that you didn't before?
It really is a case that these £1 million decisions are made in WhatsApp group chats. I used to think it was a scientific process with bar charts and graphs, and it probably is at late stage. At early stage, it's who you know, how much value you've given them, what relationship you built with them, how compelling the story and the pictures, who else is talking about you. I guess what I didn't know was that it's really just a case of vibes and relationships this early on, which is where I think most people go wrong. They treat it too much like a science and less of an art. It's both, but I'd say at the early stage it's more on the emotion relationship side rather than it being purely based upon an Excel spreadsheet.
You said earlier something about not liking the question when people say, "Oh, what would the advice have been when you asked before?" But one of my questions is, what would be one sentence that you would share with your pre-raise self, but maybe to make it more relevant? Maybe you can do one before this previous raise, but also a little sentence for you going into your next raise, because clearly you're not building a lifestyle business. So is there like a mission statement as it relates to fundraising that you'll hold dearly for yourself?
I guess the classic Alfie is just do more and work harder. But I mean, that ultimately would lead to burnout for a lot of people. So I'm not going to propose that. But I don't know about the next round, because I feel like I will be thinking about very different things in a year or two from now. I mean, you're like a different person every 6 months, right? It's so hard to kind of forecast forward. I think looking back, it would have been probably reassuring to tell myself that it's going to be okay. We're going to have a great outcome here. We're going to be able to continue to support our customers and make them happy and support the team and do that at a level that we haven't been able to do before. Then at the same time, I'd be slightly nervous about telling myself that, because then I maybe would have taken my foot off the pedal. So I don't know. These are really, really hard things to decipher and look back on. I do love the Steve Jobs speech where he said that it's really hard to connect those dots looking forward, and the only way to really connect the dots on what matters is to look backwards. I think it's so true. Like, you can have the best plan in the world, but life is going to hit you in the head with 1,000 bricks, and it really just comes down to if you have the courage and the tenacity and the determination to keep going when everything around you is falling to pieces.
What should founders stop doing when raising?
Anything that doesn't relate to either the raise or their customers or their team effectively. Thankfully, I don't really have a lot of hobbies. This is kind of all I do. So I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So that keeps me pretty busy, right? So, if I had like a golf addiction, or if I was really into, I don't know, football or something, I guess I probably would have paused that. But I'm pretty much an all-in type person anyway. Apart from my family and my business, I don't do a lot else. So it was maybe an easier one than other people. But if you've got like 5 hobbies that are taking up a lot of your time, you're gonna have to cut them, or maybe just like really, really trim that down. Which is probably not like the nice thing to say, but like, I mean, it's so true, isn't it? Like, you've been through this before. You have no time to do anything else. I was going to sleep at 1 a.m. every night, and then waking up at 4 a.m. to do a pitch in a different country, going back to bed for a few hours. For a few months, I was sleeping like a surgeon would, I imagine, where you're kind of just like sleeping in these little batches, like my newborn baby. But I actually had a mortgage to pay and employee salaries to think about. So yeah, all of the downside, but none of the upside of being a cute little baby.
All right. So founders should stop acting like they have infinite free time and operate more like a fundraising surgeon. I like that. Who's one founder or investor that you think more people should follow?
I had a lot of really fantastic angels join our pre-seed. One person that I think I have to give a shout out to is a mutual friend, Dan Murray, who you interviewed recently. Dan has a community called Founders, spelt the cool tech way with like the R and the S, no E. I joined Founders a couple of years ago, and it was my first time really being amongst other entrepreneurs who thought the same way that I do. And since then, I've joined other groups like ICE and other communities, which have been equally as fantastic. But Dan was very useful in making introductions, giving very candid advice, and just introducing me to that world and that ecosystem. Where if I I used to listen to Dan's podcast for many, many years. So it was very surreal meeting him and getting introduced to that world. And that's led to him opening the doors for many friends, certainly not consciously. I'm sure he's done this for many, many people, and which is why he's so respected in our world. But yeah, he's been infinitely useful in ways that he doesn't even know about.
Brilliant. Yeah, Dan's one of a kind, that's for sure. Where can people find you, and who should be reaching out to you?
So if you are hiring, I would love to give you some free credits to test our product. It's really good, and it will help you find and screen and shortlist fantastic candidates really fast. I know it's good because we have hired hundreds of people over the past couple of months for some of the biggest companies in the world, as well as some really high growth startups and scale ups. If you're hiring 1 or 2 people, it's probably not for you. But if you're hiring 5, 10, or a huge army of people on a continuous basis, then we definitely should chat. So my name is Alfie Whattam. I've tried to put it as a thing, so it might say alfiewhattam.com on the screen if it's come through. If it has, then you can click there to connect with me on any social networking site you like, or you can just go to our website, which is welovealpha.com, spelled ALFA. Alpha.com was taken and cost millions and millions of pounds, so I will go with welovealpha.com for now. And hit us up. Let's have a chat. Let's figure out what you're currently doing to find, attract, and qualify candidates. And I feel like within 15 minutes, we can plug you into the best LLMs in the world and show you how you can discover some incredible talent which can transform your business and really have an impact on your customers. So yeah, go to welovealpha.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat. I'd love to give you a personal demo to show you how it works. I'd love to give you a bunch of free credits. And then if it's not for you, I will happily point you in the direction of the best product that's available for your needs. Or if it is a good fit, then I'd love to work with you to figure out how we can make it a huge success.
Amazing. Any final comments, humble brags, things we should be looking out for in the future of Alpha AI, or anything else you want to say to the audience at the end here?
We've got some really exciting announcements coming over the next couple of weeks, which I'd like to hint at, but I'll get in trouble if I talk too much, which you know about. So it's pretty exciting stuff. But I just say, I don't know when this episode will come out. The stuff might already be announced by then. But yeah, just go to my LinkedIn, and if I can be helpful in any way, if you're a founder, if you want to chat about this sort of stuff, if you need help getting introductions, I would love to support you, because I know what happens if you help enough people over a long enough period of time. The universe magically will come back and do nice things for you. So I'm here to be as helpful as possible.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Alfie, and best of luck with the next steps in this journey. I'm super proud to be playing my little part in it.
Cool. Thank you.